I've been in a 7-year-ish battle of wills with a former student of mine named Allie Hagan. Some of you might know Allie. She sometimes sings up here when she's in town. She grew up here. Her family goes to church here. And a long time ago, we were at a retreat together with our youth group in Yelm, and this is how I recall the story happening. If you ask Allie, she tells it a bit different. But Allie dropped a piece of trash, and she didn't pick it up. And me, being her youth pastor, decided I'm going to teach her a lesson. So I picked up the piece of trash, tracked her down in my truck, threw it at her, and said, "Pick up your trash, Allie." And she claims it wasn't hers. And so later that week, she gave it back to me, and she said, "This isn't mine, you take care of it." And I was like, "No, this isn't my trash, this is your trash." And so I gave it back to her maybe at youth group a couple months later. I'm like, "Pick up your trash, Allie." And she kept it. And then she gave it back to me as like a birthday present, like, "Pick up your trash, Matt." My favorite delivery was I got it wrapped and it said "from Santa," and I gave it to her parents to put under the tree, and it sat for like all of Advent. She opened it up on Christmas morning it's framed, and it says, "Pick up your trash." And I thought that was like the pinnacle of this game, and it went silent for like 2 years where I didn't hear anything. I thought maybe she lost it, maybe she just accepted her defeat. But then one day, I found this in my office. This is the piece of trash, the white bit right here, and she made it into a taco because I like tacos, and she says, she called it the trash taco. And there was another picture frame on my desk that just shames me into throwing trash at children. And so this is currently where it sits. I'm losing. If you have any ideas on how to get this back to her, I'd appreciate it. But I should have picked a better opponent than Allie Hagan, because Allie is a Hagan, and that family is maybe some of the most motivated people I've ever met in my life. They go on hiking trips to like Iceland. I mean, you could just walk outside, that's fine too. Or not go on a hike, but sure, go to Iceland. In fact, I thought, man, this would be fun. What does the most motivated person like? What are they like? And so I asked AI, because we're in that age. I'm like, "Hey, will you create an image of the most motivated man in the world?" And this is what it gave me. It says, "The architect of tomorrow." He's launching that rocket ship probably from his iPad. He climbed some mountain that conveniently has a compass there. I don't know. And I said, "You know what? No, make it even more motivated." And so then this gave me the architect of forever. I can't spell yet. And so I was like, okay, so we got some more stuff. I'm like, make it even more motivated. This guy has to like be legendary for all of millennia of his motivation. And it gave me this one, the eternal motivation of eternal ambition. Is getting cooler. And then I said, "Hey, you know, it looks like you're just adding a bunch of like lightning bolts. Can you make this more interesting?" And it gave me this, the reality recoded of Undeterred Will. And I love that we're just making up names now. Undeterred Will. This is how I imagine anyone that decides to go on a hike or climb a mountain. This is what they imagine themselves as. Like, nothing will stop me. Nothing will stop me. Some examples of unstopped people that come to mind are a grandmother who wants to give their grandkids a hug. Nothing is going to stop that grandma from giving that hug. Or a fitness influencer who needs those gains to get those followers and raise their socials. Like, they will stop at nothing to get clicks. Or, like I said, anyone that decides to climb Mount Everest. They are all in their mission. And that's this series that we're starting right now through Easter. It's called All In. We're going to look at 5 moments that were recorded to have happened during Jesus' final journey to Jerusalem and ultimately Jesus' death. So Jesus is all in on this mission to die for our sins and to be raised again. And each of these moments, I'm going to challenge us to ask ourselves, what does it look like for us to go all in ourselves, both personally, but together as a church with our faith in Jesus? Now, the cool thing about these stories is that these are the less preached moments that I think you're not going to find a lot of sermons on them out there. They highlight the gritty, the uncomfortable, the costly reality of following Jesus to the cross. And we call these the Lenten deep cuts. So the first one is in Luke 13. You can get your Bibles out if you want to, but I'll put it up on the screen. It says, and what we'll see is that from Jesus himself, this first story, going all in requires an undeterred will. You could say unstopped if you want to, but undeterred is probably the more proper way to say that. This passage is one of the most poignant moments in Luke's gospel. It captures a raw and defiant and deeply tender side of Jesus. And at this point of the narrative, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. He has set his sights on Jerusalem, a journey that is very much being framed as Jesus accepting his own destiny. And so verse 31 in Luke 13 says this, "At this time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, 'Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you.' He replied, 'Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal. In any case, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem.'" And then in verse 34, it kind of shifts. He has a lament. He says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate, and I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" So we're going to break this down a little bit. Verse 31 starts out with a massive political pressure and warning. The Pharisees have warned Jesus that Herod, the man who has beheaded John the Baptist, now wants to kill him. This is actually the son of another Herod who wanted to kill Jesus when he was a baby, if you remember that from the nativity story. And so for context, here's a map, because I like history. So while I preach, you'll get jokes and you'll get geography lessons and history lessons. I don't know what's going on. This is a map of first century Israel. So when Jesus is roaming around on the earth. And Herod has been given rulership over a couple of these provinces. After Herod's dad died, other Herod, the Roman governor said, "We're going to break this land up into 4 areas. I'm going to give this to different people." What could go wrong? So Herod, this current Herod, owns these 2 provinces. He's in charge of ruling over Galilee and Perea. And so the Pharisees go to Jesus and they say, "Hey, you should leave this land. Herod wants to kill you." And you're like, "Oh, that's nice of them. They're looking out for Jesus." And that's not really what's going on here, I don't think. Because by telling Jesus to leave, it kind of looks like they might want to protect him. But there's the province down below in Judea is where Jerusalem is. It's the capital of the nation. And this is where the Pharisees have a bit of control. They run a council called the Sanhedrin. And so they're hoping that maybe he'll come out of there and get into an area where they can have control over him. The Sanhedrin was made up of 71 influential Jewish figures, including Pharisees, who wanted to kill Jesus, Sadducees, who wanted to kill Jesus, and some high priests, who wanted to kill Jesus. In fact, this might be one of the few things that all these guys agreed on. It's kind of like the Democrats and Republicans finally deciding, "Hey, we'll do this together." So the Pharisees, if they could get Jesus out of Herod's regions, they could get them on their own land, on their own turf, and they could handle him on their own. But if you read up to this in Luke 9, Jesus has already set his sight on going to Jerusalem. He hasn't been motivated by this little threat. He says it's a pivotal point where Jesus says he sets his sights, he sets his face towards Jerusalem. So in all of these games, Jesus is being squeezed by this like puppet governor and the religious elite, and he is undeterred by any of it because despite the danger, Jesus has embraced the path of suffering. In verse 32, Jesus has a sharp response. He says, "Go tell that fox." Now, I don't know about you, but I think foxes are pretty cool. I worked at a camp in Oakhurst, California for a couple summers, and you get camp names, and mine was Sly Fox because I like to play tricks on 3rd graders. Not my most poignant moment, also my most poignant moment. But in the ancient world, calling someone a fox was generally a derogatory insult. It characterized them as being crafty, but also deceitful and insignificant, or just a base person, rather than a compliment for their intelligence. So Jesus calls the governor of the land a fox. And he says this 3-day thing. I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the 3rd day, I will reach my goal. I don't think this is a literal 72-hour countdown. I think it's more of an idiom, meaning this short, determined amount of time. And it also subtly foreshadows the resurrection, I think. But despite the danger here, Jesus is embracing God's timeline. In God's timing, things will happen the way they need to happen. In verse 33, if you keep reading, there's this Greek word called dei. It's a divine imperative. It's a must. I must go do these things. I must go to Jerusalem, which is ironic. And Jesus says this, for surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. It's super sarcastic because Jerusalem, the holy city, has developed a reputation for killing messengers of God that have been sent to it. So Zechariah was a prophet, got sent to Jerusalem, they killed him. Uriah was a prophet, got sent to Jerusalem, they killed him. Jerusalem threatened to kill Jeremiah many, many times. Jesus knows exactly what kind of city the prophets want him, or the city Jerusalem is, and he accelerates towards it. So despite the danger, Jesus embraces his purpose. And then in verse 34, we get this really cool metaphor in the New Testament. After snapping at Herod, Jesus' tone shifts to this agonizing lament, and he uses a feminine image. He likens himself to a mother hen. In the face of a fox of King Herod, a hen protects her chicks with her own body. A hen has no armor, no sharp talons, and she protects her chicks by gathering them under her wings and absorbing blows from predators herself. And I think this is a vivid picture of the atonement. Jesus is interposing his body between judgment and God's children. And so despite danger, Jesus is embracing his people. So, what do we learn from this little deep cut of political angling, name calling, and chick gathering? First is, I think, an undeterred will takes perseverance. I don't know if you've heard of a man named Walt Disney, but he's a pretty smart dude. He was once fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination. The father of imagination got fired for lacking imagination. His first media studio went bankrupt, and he eventually had to sell his own life insurance and strike a deal with ABC just to get Disneyland off the ground. And even when it got off the ground, there were still struggles to get it to where the empire is now. And so Jesus in verse 30 has the same kind of perseverance. He says, I will keep driving out demons and healing people, and today and tomorrow, and on the 3rd day, I will reach my goal. Perseverance is about finishing a job, but it's also about refusing to be distracted along the way. My grandfather gave me a poem when I graduated high school. I think he stole it from Calvin Coolidge. I totally Googled it. He rewrote some parts of it, but it's on perseverance. It says, nothing in the world can take the place of perseverance. Creativity will not. Few things are found more often than frustrated people who are creative. Intelligence will not. The geniuses of the world often go unnoticed. Education cannot. We are surrounded by educated wanderers seeking direction. Wealth will not. Once found, it loses its luster. Perseverance, though, combined with God-directed purpose, are omnipotent. Now, we might think that perseverance means gritting your teeth, toughing it out through the pain. But for Jesus, though, it meant staying the course in his daily ministry of helping and healing, even while the shadow of the cross grew closer and closer and larger. So perseverance is the ability to do the today and tomorrow tasks when you know that the 3rd day is going to come with a heavy price. An undeterred will also takes courage. And there's ever been one person in my life that has modeled courage to me, it has been my grandfather. Here's a picture of him. He is a pretty good looking dude, not gonna lie. He's got good genes in him. He was a helicopter pilot. He flew also some like tanker planes that refilled planes in midair. Definitely much cooler of a guy than me. We would always ask him to tell us stories of when you're in battle, tell us of like any big war stories, and he never would, ever, because I don't think he wanted to glorify it at all. And I tell you this story not to do that as well, but just to tell you he was a man of courage, and he has inspired me. This last week, my dad sent me this article that was in the newspaper describing what Grandpa did to earn a couple of his medals. So I want to read it for you. Also, my grandfather would hate this if he knew I was doing this, but he's gone now, so it doesn't matter. It says the major returned or earned the Distinguished Flying Cross last June as lead pilot in a flight of 8 CH-3 Jolly Green Giant helicopters, delivering Allied personnel to an area of enemy activity. He returned a short time later and, facing intense automatic weapons fire from enemy emplacements, rescued the Allied team from certain death or capture by the enemy. The three air medals received by the major recognize his outstanding airmanship and courage of sustained aerial flight from March to October in 1969. Major Knapp, who served with a special operations unit in Thailand, not going to butcher that name, during his 12-month combat tour, holds a total of 4 air medals. The most important tasks often are faced with the biggest opponents. And I don't think Jesus was delusional about what awaited him in Jerusalem either. He knew Jerusalem's track record. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It is the will to press on. And Mary Ann Radmacher wrote that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is a quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. And so when you calculate the costs and when you see what's on the horizon, an undeterred will helps you step towards it anyway. Ernest Hemingway often gets attributed to this phrase that courage is found when your must is louder than your might. An undeterred will also takes compassion. Jesus doesn't set his sight on Jerusalem because he loves the conflict. He sets his face towards Jerusalem because he loved the people, even the very people who opposed him. And as someone who has had the honor and the responsibility and the privilege and the sadness of being with people as they die, I don't know if there's a harder thing to do than to take your own pet to be put down. I remember when we had to do that with our dogs. It was one of those moments I could have just dropped them off and let the doctor handle it, but I was not going to let my dog be alone in that moment. I wanted our dog to know that he was loved, that she was loved from the beginning until the end. Having compassion is loving someone sacrificially. It's hurting with someone. It's risking stuff. It's giving up things so that other people might benefit. Jesus did it, and he calls us to do it too. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of my favorite authors, famously wrote, when Christ calls someone to die, or calls someone, he bids him to come and die. So what is this undeterred will of perseverance and courage and compassion? Well, an undeterred will focused on Jesus embraces the suffering that we see in this world. There's a lot of it. And a lot of people exit stage left from faith when they engage with it because they have questions like, if God is so loving, why is there suffering in the first place? And 2, why doesn't following Jesus make that any better? Sometimes it feels like I'm head first into suffering since I'm following Jesus. Can't God in all of your great master plan make this better? And those are great questions, and you should ask those. I ask those questions almost every day. And I came across this content creator on Instagram who was kind of mulling over these thoughts, and I loved it so much I wanted to share it with you because he's asking this question, suffering, and why, if God is so, what is the purpose of suffering? How do we embrace it? This is a musician, his name is James Burke, and he says, Christianity is the reality of and the embracing of suffering. It leads with that. It doesn't lead with bliss states or escaping the human experience. You're here. You're going to suffer. So what are you going to suffer for? What is needless? Or are you going to suffer in the name of the good and the true and the beautiful? And if you suffer in those names, it's rebirth. It's resurrection. And it's not about skipping to the resurrection either. It's blessed are you while people insult you, persecute you, lie about you. You are blessed right now in the suffering right now. It's not about getting out of it. It's like this is blessed. And when you taste it, you can't lose. To have an undeterred will, I think we have to stop trying to negotiate our way out of pain. Jesus knew that Jerusalem was going to be a painful collision. But because his destination was beyond it, he persisted nonetheless. Think about how maybe we might treat the news or our social media feed. It gets intense sometimes. This week was intense, and it's easy to turn it off and detach from it and to worry about it later or not worry about it at all. And I just imagine if Jesus detached in this moment, where might we be instead today? Instead, Jesus didn't detach. He absorbed it all. I go back to that hen imagery, and he protects her, where she protects her chicks. She absorbs. She takes the heat. She takes the wind. She takes the blows from her predators so that the chicks don't have to. Jesus embraced the suffering of the cross to absorb the brokenness of our world. And so when I get lost in this question of why do we have to suffer? Why are there bad things? I don't know if I have a great answer, but I hear this answer, and it is that's part of the journey. We can't escape it. For some reason or another, this is the reality God has created. But it's one thing if God set all this up and then disassociated from his people. It's like, you guys deal with it on your own. It is a completely other thing altogether that God engages in that suffering himself. He doesn't leave us alone in the world to suffer, and he suffers alongside of us because he loves us. And that's the part where I'm at, where I don't understand it, but I get to persist. That is the motivation I have moving forward in my faith. Now, I'm not saying that following Jesus means that you're always going to suffer. On the contrary, there are a lot of great things that are involved with following Jesus, a lot of blessings. But if as Christians, we can embrace the worst, then everything else becomes embraceable. If death itself has lost its sting, then how much easier is it for us when we have to have a hard conversation where you need to be vulnerable and you need to apologize first, or you need to speak the truth without fear of losing your worth? If death has lost its sting, then how about the stress of a shrinking bank account? Fluctuating numbers on a screen, while stressful, don't rob you of your peace or your generosity. If death has lost its sting, then what about the weight of a failed season? They aren't the end of the story, but the end of just a chapter, and a new one is beginning. If death has lost its sting, then what about the anxiety of an uncertain future? If the end of the story is victory, then the middle of the story, the traffic jams, the health scares, the parenting struggles, is just the terrain that we're passing through. And you will find that if you can embrace suffering, everything else becomes embraceable, and you will stop living on the defensive. For me, I'm stepping into this new role as your transitional lead pastor. And don't go, oh my gosh, is Matt suffering from this? No, Matt, it's good. I'm embracing it. I've actually been trained to do this. I've been your pastor for 11 years. I was a pastor at another church. I went to seminary. I've been ordained in 3 different denominations. It just happens to be the covenant right now. Like, this is something that I felt called to. I'm trained for it. I'm excited for it. Yes, it's different. But for this moment, I am embracing it because God is in it. So an undeterred will embraces suffering and all the other little difficulties because it's motivated by renewal. This is the beauty of following Jesus. He takes the most difficult parts of life and he renews them in us. And he even does more than that. He gives us purpose in it. being motivated by renewal, real quick, is not just putting a nice spin on your most painful moment, putting a bow on something, looking for the positive in it. The value of seeing good, there is value in seeing the good in things, but there is a danger when we embrace this toxic positivity instead of actual renewal. There's nothing positive about suffering. Jesus died on a cross. His friends betrayed him. His community executed him. But out of that suffering, our whole trajectory shifts. This is important, that following the way of Jesus means that you are seeking the renewal for yourself, because you know God can do that. It is what Celebrate Recovery is all about, and I highly encourage you to go meet them after this service. Because sometimes it's about being transformed in what you see to be true. Romans 12 says that you're transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's an unlearning process of the patterns of cynicism and comparison and control. Sometimes it's about renewing your actions, like taking a Sabbath and resting the world on God's shoulders and not yours. Or confessing your burdens and failures to break through the power of shame. There's also a great part of a prayer in Psalm 23 where David proclaims, "He restores my soul." So we're seeking renewal in ourselves, but we're also seeking renewal for our neighbor, for our community. It's not, I'm suffering, so you must suffer too. It's not, the only way I can stop suffering is if you suffer in my place. It's seeking God's peace for yourself and for the person next to you. James 2:15 says, "Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food, and if one of you says to them, 'Go in peace and keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" Jeremiah 29 even says that, hey, while the Israelites were in exile, God challenges his people to seek the good of that city. It's seeking the good of the city, not by claiming power, not by political maneuvering, not by waging war. It's through embracing suffering and letting that frame everything else. After all, Jesus set his sights on Jerusalem and the cross because he was motivated for our renewal. So for us, this could mean radical hospitality. Henry Nouwen wrote that our own scars are what make us safe for others. It could mean that you could even validate someone's pain by removing the stigma of a struggle that they're going through. This can build a culture of honesty and trust. It could mean that you're even identifying gaps in our community safety nets where our systems are broken, and you're seeking to rebuild those systems so that we can prioritize people over a process. It could also mean that you now have this special kind of energy to bear someone else's burden. When you've seen the bottom and you've survived, you might be in a stronger place to stand in the gap when someone is currently too weak to fight for themselves. An enduring will embraces suffering and is motivated by renewal, both for ourselves and for our community. So I have 3 questions for you to consider. Number 1, what are your sights set on? Number 2, how do you and the people you are close to deal with suffering? And number 3, how are you different today because of any suffering you may have experienced?